Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me. I hope you had a great weekend. I have got a lot to talk about, so let's go ahead and dig in if we can. I want to go back and talk about something briefly that I kind of touched on, I think on Friday in the last video, where I said that Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, has evidently proposed cutting the Pentagon's budget, the Department of Defense budget, by a great deal. He threw out the figure of 8% over like a 5-year period, or whatever it is, whatever it amounts to. But I didn't clarify this point of that when I brought that up, because I want to make it clear we could stand to cut a huge amount of money out of the defense budget. Now, I want to be clear, I'm all for a strong national defense for the United States of America or for any nation. But since the era of Papa Bush, really before that, our philosophy of defense has been one of offense. And as you know, George Bush and his son sold a lot of Americans on the idea that we've got to go over to Nation A or Nation B and attack them before they can come over to the United States and attack us here, which is utter folly. And it takes a lot of money to support the cost of military expansionism, which is what we've been doing for the better part of 100 years, folks. I mean, we are everywhere. We have I think over 100 military bases all over the world. For what? Why do we have a military base in Germany, for heaven's sakes? Why do we have a military base? Name it. Just pick a country. We have one in Syria. They're everywhere. And we simply can't afford this. It is something else that is bankrupting us. I'm for a strong defense, but our philosophy that emanates from the Pentagon should be one of defense, not offense. We simply are bankrupting ourselves with this military philosophy of perpetual expansionism and always shooting first and asking questions later. We had no business, as you know, going into Iraq, for example. We've had no business going into Ukraine, where we are fighting a war against Russia. Make no mistake, the war in Ukraine is a war between the United States and Russia. More on that in just a moment. And it need not happen. I mean, the closest threat of war that the United States has is from invaders on our southern and northern borders. There's your war if you're looking for a war. And under the Biden regime, we wouldn't defend our own borders, for heaven's sakes. And that was legitimate to defend those borders. Instead, we position our troops on borders all over the world, in Iraq and in Syria. And I have no doubt in Ukraine as well. Certainly our equipment is there. We know that for a fact. So the point is, we could stand to cut the military budget. As a matter of fact, I believe that it would create a stronger military if our philosophy was one of defense, and we simply put all of our emphasis on defending our coast, borders, and airspace, and let all these other nations work their deals out. Let Russia and Ukraine work out their situation. Let Syria and let all these other nations work out their own problems without our intervention. I have no problem with us serving as a peacemaker or maybe a facilitator through our State Department to try and get parties to, come together and talk. But as far as military intervention, it should not happen. It just shouldn't. It's too expensive. War should not be a matter of profit, ladies and gentlemen. And it sickens me when it is, and it has been for a long time now. I understand that military weaponry is not free. Somebody's got to build it. And defense contractors build our military weaponry. And, they're not going to do that for free. I understand that. But in the last few decades in the United States, this has been an utter scam with people profiting and getting rich from defense contracts. That should not be. I'm looking at you, Dick Cheney, and of course many others. But anyway, the bottom line is Pete Hegseth is calling for budget cuts. Isn't that a little strange that the head, a cabinet level department head, would actually be calling for budget cuts? You don't hear that every day. Let me tell you a little story real quick. Quite a number of years ago, back in the late 80s and early 90s, I was living near Jacksonville, Florida, which is a big Navy town, and I had a friend who was a fighter jet pilot in the Navy. He was a lieutenant. He flew in the first Gulf War. He flew F-18 Hornets. And one day he said to me, "Why don't you come out to the airfield and have a look around?" I couldn't believe I was allowed to, and this was right before we invaded. It was actually before Kuwait, the Gulf War, where we went and repelled the Kuwaiti invasion. But anyway, I went out to Cecil Airfield in Jacksonville, and I was standing there close to the tarmac behind a fence, and the Hornet pilots, the fighter pilots, were doing landings and takeoffs. And my friend was a graduate of the Naval Academy, and he had got his commission in the Navy, and he was flying Hornets off of the Teddy Roosevelt aircraft carrier. And I'm standing there with him watching the landings and takeoffs, and I said, what are they doing? I mean, it seemed obvious, but I said, what are these guys doing? And I figured he'd say, they're just landing and taking off, but he said they're wasting gas or fuel. I said, what do you mean they're wasting fuel? He said, well, it's close to the end of the fiscal year, and the Department of the Navy doesn't want their budget cut. So they're using every means necessary to use up all the money in their budget so that Congress won't cut any of their money. So they're just up there flying around burning fuel. Now that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. And Hegseth is saying we can cut the Defense Department's budget, and I highly support that. I hope it happens. All right, now let's move on. Trump continues throwing Vladimir Zelensky under the bus. It happened again. I want to read to you a few excerpts from an article written over the weekend by Alexandra Marquez of NBC News. Listen to this. This is Trump appeared, I think it was Friday morning, on the Fox News morning program with Brian Kilmeade. And this is what Alexandra Marquez said. President Donald Trump on Friday continued his ongoing attacks against Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky as tensions between the two leaders exploded onto the public stage this week. I've been watching this man for years now as his cities get demolished, as his people get killed, as the soldiers get decimated. Trump said Friday morning, I've been watching for years, and I've been watching him negotiate with no cards. He has no cards, and you get sick of it. You just get sick of it, and I've had it. Unquote. The U.S. has been working with international partners to broker peace talks to end the war in Ukraine. Over the weekend, several high-level U.S. officials headed to Saudi Arabia to meet with members of the Russian government without Ukraine. Following the meeting, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the preliminary talks included a decision to reestablish embassy staffing and potential economic benefits for Russia if the war in Ukraine ends. But on Friday, Trump told Kilmeade that he doesn't think Zelensky is very important to be at meetings, to be honest with you. He's been at meetings for 3 years and nothing gets done, Trump said. So I don't think it's very important for him to be at meetings, to be honest with you. He's been there for 3 years. He makes it very hard to make deals. But look what's happened to his country. It's been demolished. Unquote. Later Friday, during a meeting with governors at the White House, Trump added he has had very good talks with Putin and I've had not such good talks with Ukraine. Trump added that peace talks are the only way to stop more deaths in the war, telling the governors, millions of people are killed, I think, far more people than anyone understands. It should have never happened. As the details of the potential peace talks began to emerge last week, Zelensky was adamant that Ukraine must have a seat at the table. He said, I will never accept any decisions between the U.S. and Russia about Ukraine. Never. This is the war in Ukraine against us, and it's our human losses. The spat between Trump and Zelensky intensified this week, spilling into public as Trump said on Tuesday that Zelensky should have never started the war which Russia launched when it invaded Ukraine in February of 22. Zelensky then accused Trump of living in a, quote, disinformation bubble, unquote, and pushing Kremlin talking points. In response, Trump called Zelensky a dictator and a modestly successful comedian. There you have it. What do you think about that? Trump called him exactly what he is, a dictator, and he is a comedian, or at least he was, still is a big joke as far as I'm concerned. But think about it, folks. We were always told that Zelensky is there to spread democracy in Ukraine. Well, he is what? He is 5 years. How many years has he been in office now? He's been in office for 1 year more than is allowed by Ukrainian law, I suppose. He has suspended elections. He has outlawed rival political parties, and he has outlawed religious leaders, and he has outlawed the Russian Orthodox Church in Ukraine and jailed their priests and bishops. They're in jail right now. Now you tell me, is that the work of a dictator or not? That's how dictators operate. So Trump is minimizing Zelensky, basically saying he has no role in the peace talks. And folks, he's exactly right. This war is between the United States and Russia. Zelensky is a puppet, as everybody know, or everybody should know. And he doesn't need to have a role. He has, as Trump said, he has no cards. He has nothing to offer. This is ostensibly a war that's going to be settled between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. And Trump is a far cry from Joe Biden. It's as simple as that. I think that the gravy train for Mr. Zelensky has come to an end, and I think he knows it. And this is good news. Now, I want to transition from that story over to the fact that we still have what I consider to be a generational problem in Washington, D.C., among the political leadership there. What I mean is, I would venture to say, and I don't know the exact number or percentage, but I would venture to say that the majority of politicians that are in Congress right now have latched on to a Cold War mentality that they got honestly, and they're not giving it up. That they still see Russia through the lens of the now defunct, the former communist Soviet Union. I know I've talked about this at length, but it keeps raising its head, folks. Democrats and Republicans, when you say Russia, and a lot of Americans, when you say Russia or you say Putin, so many politicians and so many Americans still get the image in their head of the old communist Soviet Union and the Cold War and Leonid Brezhnev and Andropov and all these people. People that still live with that mentality or that interpretation of what is now Russia really need to update their files, folks, because Russia is not the Soviet Union, And Putin is not Brezhnev or Andropov or any of those people, or Stalin or Lenin. It's a whole new world over there. The people of Russia operate freely in their open society that has plenty of liberty there. They can worship as they see fit or not if they don't want to. It is not the Soviet Union anymore. God, I wish we could educate every American to this fact. I wish we could send every American to Russia so they could just have a look around and understand things are not as they once were. If you don't believe me, ask Tucker Carlson. He's gone, he's been there, and he knows it. And he posted a video about it. He was out shopping. I know of people that live in Russia right now. I just got an email from a guy the other day who he is an American who lives in Russia. And he has a YouTube channel. He's just out strolling around. He doesn't live in Moscow or St. Petersburg. I forget the town he's in. But he's out at nighttime strolling around. The city's hustling and bustling, and they're safe. It's a lot safer than New York City. It's a lot safer than Chicago. So it's just a whole new world. But you've got this old Cold War mentality that still is so prevalent among our political class and our ruling class. For example, there's a senator from the state of Louisiana by the name of John Kennedy. Perhaps you've heard of him. Now, I kind of like old John Kennedy. John Kennedy is kind of folksy. He talks like this with a slow southern accent, Mr. President. You know, down where I come from, down there around New Orleans and Baton Rouge. He's got some Cajun in him. You know, he's fun to listen to. But unfortunately, John Kennedy is one of these people I'm talking about who has not updated his files. These people just need to take a trip to Russia and have a look around. Because if they did, about 2 or 3 days into their trip, they'd be scratching their heads going, damn, this ain't what I thought it was. This is what John Kennedy said just a couple of days ago with regard to the president of Russia. I quote, Vladimir Putin is a gangster. He's a gangster with a black heart. He makes Jeffrey Dahmer look like Mother Teresa, unquote. You know, Senator Kennedy, your folksy manner is kind of cute, kind of clever, but this was one really idiotic and supremely ignorant thing for you to say. That Vladimir Putin is a gangster and he's got a black heart and he makes Jeffrey Dahmer look like Mother Teresa. I wanted to insert a video right here of Vladimir Putin at the recent Nativity church services there in, I believe it was in Moscow, where he is standing there with all the other worshipers, just standing there worshiping God. Now, you may be a cynic and saying it's all for show. I'm not going that far because he does it all the time. Unlike, quite frankly, the American presidents of recent memory who never darkened the door of a church, Putin is constantly in church. And I don't believe it's just for show because he has been a Christian his whole life. He was baptized a baby shortly after he was born. So you're not going to convince me, Senator Kennedy, that Vladimir Putin has a black heart. Where were you last Sunday, Senator Kennedy? He makes Jeffrey Dahmer look like Mother Teresa. What a stupid thing to say. Senator Kennedy, why don't you fly to Russia and go to church with President Putin? You might learn a thing or two. Just disgraceful that he would say that. All right, let me move on. Two more things here that I've got to get to. Have you heard Donald Trump has proposed selling the Nancy Pelosi federal building in San Francisco? Watch this.
looking to sell the Nancy Pelosi Federal Building on 7th Street and the century-old building at 50 United Nations Plaza. The Trump administration says it will save money by avoiding maintenance on the buildings, selling the properties, then leasing office space for federal workers. Former Congresswoman Jackie Spears says it's just about vengeance.
It's another example of how he's coming after Democrats, he's coming after California, and it's all about payback.
Okay, so there you have it. Donald Trump apparently wants to sell. I didn't know there was a Nancy Pelosi Federal Building in San Francisco, but apparently there is. And Donald Trump wants to sell it. There you go, Mr. President. Put it up on Zillow. This is a great idea. I don't want anything with this disgraceful woman's name on it. But if you're looking for a buyer, Mr. President, I think I've got the perfect buyer for the Nancy Pelosi Federal Building. And you know who it is? Nancy Pelosi. Why do I say that? For two reasons. Number one, well, it's already got her name on it, so she won't have to redecorate. And number two, Lord knows she's got the money. Right, Nan? This is a woman who comes into office with modest wealth, of course, as you know, and now she is a multi-millionaire. Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
We just wanted to come in and say something.
Sorry, we got a little interruption on the set here.
Hi, everybody. Happy birthday. Give Daddy a kiss.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Day late and a dollar short, but hey. Well, thank you. That's my wife, Marina, if you don't know, and our beast, Kiki. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, I am officially an older man. I'm now 64 years old. Wow. I can't hardly believe it. Okay, so that's Nancy Pelosi. One more thing. I saved the best for last. Donald Trump, some of you have undoubtedly seen this, but for those of you who haven't seen this, you're in for a treat. Donald Trump, on Friday, I believe it was committed a murder in the White House. What are you talking about? Donald Trump owned the governor of Maine. Have you heard about this? The governor of Maine was at a function. I believe the governors were at the White House, and Trump was in front of the governors at the White House, and he was talking to them about how he has signed executive orders banning men in women's sports, which is a very good thing. I'm glad that he did that. He should have done that. Men have got no business being in women's sports. Well, after he brought this topic up, he then looked around and saw the governor of Maine, and this is where it gets interesting. Watch this video and enjoy what happened. Check this out.
The NCAA has complied immediately, by the way. That's good. But I understand Maine. Is Maine here, the governor of Maine? Well, are you not going to comply with it?
I'm complying with state and federal laws.
We are the federal law. Well, you better do it. You better do it because you're not going to get any federal funding at all if you don't. And by the way, your population, even though it's somewhat liberal, although I did very well there, your population doesn't want men playing in women's sports. So you better comply because otherwise you're not getting any federal funding.
See you in court.
Every state, good. I'll see you in court. I look forward to that. That should be a real easy one. And enjoy your life after governor because I don't think you'll be in elected politics.
Okay, so there you have it. Trump says, is the governor of Maine here? Right here. Oh, okay. Are you not going to comply with the order that men can't be in women's sports? Oh, we're going to comply with all state and federal law. And Trump says, well, we are the federal law, honey. And then he says, if you don't comply, you're not getting any federal funds for your state. They shouldn't be getting any anyway. And then you can hear her say, well, I'll see you in court. And that went over like a ton of bricks with Donald Trump. Trump said, yeah, I'll see you in court. That'll be an easy win. And then he goes, enjoy your life after you're the governor, because after this, I doubt nobody's going to want you in elected politics. This man is just chunks of fun, is he not? He is unrestrained. He just speaks his mind, and I love it. It's refreshing. I've never had a politician like this in my lifetime. It is darn refreshing to see. I don't agree with Trump on everything, with special regard to fiscal issues, and of course, he's right about this, folks. It is ludicrous that we would have men in women's sports. And I would simply say to the governor of Maine, who is a woman, I think she's a woman. I should have looked it up, I'm sorry. But like I've said, men were entering women's sports, and all you heard from the National Organization for Women was crickets. Where was Gloria Steinem? Where was Billie Jean King? Men are taking over your sports. Why aren't you out there protesting? And the governor of Maine is just like them, apparently. Well, we're just not going to comply with the executive order. Well, then you're not getting any federal funds. Well, I'll see you in court. Yeah, I'll see you in court. That'll be an easy win. I love it. All right, folks. That is what is going on. Thank you so much for joining me today. Comment down below. Let me know your thoughts about everything we talked about today. If you would, please be so kind as to give me a thumbs up on the video and subscribe to the old Triple T channel if you have not done so yet. All the relevant links are down below. You can email me. You can buy me a cup of coffee if you would like to say thanks or happy birthday. That'd be fantastic as well. Thanks for joining me, everybody. I will see you soon. Bye-bye.